Well, I think all of y'all can see my, oh, maybe not. Sure. Okay, cool. Minimize this. Well, welcome to our August 7th meeting of the North Houston Space Society. We're going to start off with a few opening remarks, and then Greg Stanley is going to update us on the latest space news. And then we have a fantastic speaker, Gitika Gorthi. She's with the organization that she created, UnitedThinkers.org, and she's inspiring her peers and the next generation. So it's going to be exciting to hear from her. We'll have some Q&A and then some time at the end to share your recent, kind of space experiences. Where were you whenever you saw the New Shepard launch and the Virgin Galactic flight and the stacking of the Starship with the Super Heavy and anything else? So just to familiarize everybody, National Space Society has a vision of people living and working in thriving communities beyond the Earth and using the vast resources of space for the dramatic betterment of humanity. Oftentimes we talk about needing more power. Only about 1/700th billionth of the sun's energy actually falls on the Earth's surface. So with things like space-based solar power and finding ways to actually harness that energy, we have essentially unlimited energy available to humanity. We just need to figure out how to capture it and use it, along with an entire solar system of raw materials and fascinating things to learn. So space exploration can greatly improve humanity. So what do we do to kind of help further along this vision? Well, we have these monthly meetings where we invite a guest speaker and update people on the space news and trying to provide a forum for people to connect who's interested in this. We go on tours. We got to visit the NanoRacks facility and was able to see and actually touch the Bishop airlock before it got sent up to the ISS. And I welcome anybody to join us. Just go to northhoustonspace.org. You can sign up for email list there. Highly encourage everybody to join the National Space Society. If you go to a newsstand, you'll see our a magazine that's put out by a National Space Society called Ad Astra, and it's filled with great content. It comes out on a regular basis. And by connecting with us, you could connect with other people who share this vision, and we could work together to educate and inspire communities about the benefits of going to space. So just want to remind you all that the meeting is being recorded and we'll post it online. I encourage everybody to put their video on, but if you need to turn it off, the little icon to do so is in the bottom left-hand side of the screen. Also, you can mute and unmute. Sometimes we might make everybody mute it just to ensure that we have a meeting that's good for everybody. There's also a chat feature, so you can send messages to the speakers. And then when there is time for Q&A at the end, there's a feature inside of Zoom that allows for you to virtually raise your hand. So if you go down to the bottom, you'll see this reactions, and you click raise your hand, and then it allows for us to call on people in order and spend more time asking and answering questions rather than saying, why don't you go? No, you go. So keep that feature in mind. So now on with the program. So now we're on to our second thing, which is the recent space news. And we have Greg Stanley. For those of you who may be attending for the first time, Greg Stanley, he's mostly retired, but stays very, very busy. He creates, develops, and manages innovative technology, especially on artificial intelligence. He has a PhD in chemical engineering from Northwestern University. He has a bachelor's in chemical engineering from Purdue, and he's published over 25 peer-reviewed technical papers. He's worked on a variety of projects for companies, including Exxon, Gensim, AT&T, Intelsat, Biosphere 2, and if you haven't made it out to Arizona to see Biosphere 2, I definitely encourage you to do so. It's a remarkable facility. A Japanese nuclear industry and government consortium, integration objects, and BMC. And he's also the North Houston Space Society Vice President. So with that, Greg, let me turn it over to you.
Thank you. Let's see. Okay, is the screen up now?
I can see it.
Okay, good. Be right there. Okay, well, I'm covering the news since our last meeting, roughly a month each time we do this. And we'll start off with the suborbital space tourism. Now, we've talked about this in the previous meetings. The last one was right before the these recent launches, so I won't spend a whole lot of time on these, but they did finally happen. Virgin Galactic launched first on July 11th, and this is a test. Basically, Richard Branson and 5 other employees, 2 of whom were pilots. Total ride about 90 minutes, but most of that is in the carrier aircraft that takes them up. You can see in the picture up here. There's the rocket plane is kind of in the center. It's carried up by these, the 2 joined together planes. Then it blasts up, and at that point, the ride is actually fairly similar to what you would get from Blue Origin. So you get about 3 minutes of weightlessness. They go about 53 miles up. So of course, there's some controversy on, well, exactly where the space started. We talked about that before, but that meets the U.S. Air Force definition anyway. The next test would be in September with members of the Italian Air Force. They claim they have 600 reservations already, between $200,000 and $250,000 per seat. And now they said they'll take orders for new tickets starting next year at $450,000. So, those of you could have had a bargain if you just went in there a little sooner. Blue Origin launched shortly thereafter. That included Jeff Bezos, his brother, and also the oldest person to travel into space and the youngest person to travel into space. And that was about an 11-minute ride. That one's completely automated, no pilots. You'll also get about 3 minutes of weightlessness on that trip. And they go up to 66 miles. So that's more than the 62 miles that certainly everybody would agree is pretty much the start of space. Now, they also claim they have a big backlog. They say they've sold about $100 million for future flights. Going out a little further into low Earth orbit, the International Space Station, they got an upgrade, a pretty big one this time. This was launched by Russia, the Nauka Science Lab. That went up, it went up July 21st and arrived and docked on the 29th. This thing is pretty big. It's 44,000 pounds, about 43 feet long. And it's really the first large pressurized element to be added to the space station since 2011. There was a small one added, the Bigelow space thing we added later. But in terms of large elements, that's the biggest one in quite a while. The funny thing is this thing has actually been in development for about 20 years. Originally, it was planned as a backup to the very first space station module. So that goes back to 1998 with the Zarya module, which was built by Russia, paid for by NASA. That launch, finally, they were going to do a slight variation on that. They were going to launch it in 2007, but that got delayed until now. This thing was about 5 times the mass of the old module that was in that same docking position. That had been there since 2001. So they had to get rid of that. They got rid of that on July 26th. They towed it off with one of their Progress cargo ships and burned it up in the atmosphere. It adds quite a bit. Because it is bigger, it added some new science areas. It adds a new sleeping compartment, which will be taken by Russian cosmonauts. It added a toilet and some oxygen generation. The other thing that went up with this particular launch was the European robot arm. And this is another relic in a way. It's a big one, 37 feet. It was built 15 years ago, but never delivered. There hasn't been enough in the way of lift capacity to get up to the space station to get things up as fast as people want it. And this is kind of an extreme example of that. This one will be the first arm that can actually crawl all over the Russian parts of the station. There's another major robot arm up there that can crawl around from anchor point to anchor point on the western part of the station. But this will now allow the same thing to happen on the Russian side. The picture down below here shows you what it looks like. Once they get up into space, before they dock, they do deploy solar panels so they have power. They have radiators built into the thing. That's not quite enough. They're going to need more, but that's something they do by adding on with a spacewalk later on. There's docking points at either end. So on the left-hand side here, that's what docks with the space station. The right-hand side, in the future, there will be another module being added to there. And then there's also an airlock in the same general area. So here's what it looked like after docking. The Nauka's module is the one to the right here. In front of that is one of the Russian modules, and this is it's either a Progress cargo ship or as a Soyuz capsule for astronauts. I'm not sure. They look about the same except for a portal, and I'm not sure I can really tell which one that is. But anyway, that's what it looked like after installation. The picture down here in the lower right, this shows what it looked like on the inside. There's 2 Russian cosmonauts there. Now there's a lot of stuff all packed up. It's going to take them quite a while to get this thing up and operational, but at least this is what it looked like when they first installed it. A little picture here giving you a feel for what's on the space station. The Nauka module is going here on the kind of left-hand side. In rough terms, the left-hand side of this diagram is Russian, the right side is Western, mainly US. So the Nauka module goes there, and they're showing a future hookup with a Soyuz craft for delivering astronauts, but that same docking port can be used for cargo as well. This particular drawing was done by the Europeans for the robot arm. So of course they emphasized there's where the robot arm initially goes. And of course it can move around after that. And you know, some of the other things that show up here are things like the solar panels and so on. Now, there was unfortunately a major glitch. There was actually initially there was a glitch with during the flight, but the big one happened really after docking. They'd been docked in place for a little bit, and then they started firing a thruster for about 15 minutes. And this thing ended up rotating the space station 1.5 times. It made 1.5 complete revolutions. It was done slowly. They claimed that the astronauts wouldn't notice it. I think they would have noticed if they were looking out windows. So maybe it's good there aren't too many windows there. It did overwhelm the normal stabilization for the space station. The space station weighs about 1 million pounds. You know, once you get it moving, you know, it takes some time to fix it. They fought this for about an hour. There's thrusters on the Zvezda module, and also they also fired some thrusters on one of the Progress cargo ships to counteract the thrust until they finally could turn the thing off. It just so happened that when the thrusters on the Nauka started up, they were out of range of the Russian controls, and they didn't have a way to turn them off right away. So that's why it took them a while. It was a fairly exciting time. The NASA flight director was actually not even, he was just there kind of just to look at things. He was officially off duty, but he got involved in this really quickly. His quote was, the space station brought a knife to a gunfight. And yeehaw, that was a day. So he was, needless to say, that was more excitement than they were looking for. But everything is okay now. One thing it did impact was the Boeing Starliner launch. Now, a little background on that. There are 2 commercial crew contracts that NASA has let for taking astronauts to the space station. One goes to SpaceX, and of course they've already delivered astronauts. And the second one was to Boeing for the Starliner. And that's the capsule that you see in this picture right here. Using an Atlas V rocket, and then when it goes back to Earth, it comes down by parachute, drops into Mexico. They had a test in December 2019, and it failed to reach the space station. It went into the wrong lower orbit. And then they've reviewed this, and it turned out there were also some communications problems and some kind of a glitch that affected the thrusters. So a lot of work had to be done to reassure everybody that things were in place. They were finally all set to do a new test, particular cargo to the space station, but then the instability of the space station control hit. So they put that off. And as soon as that was over, then they discovered there was a separate problem with some valve, and they're still working on that one. So they have not announced the launch window. In fact, they've moved the whole assembly back into the building. Going a little further out to lunar news, a couple things here. One on the human landing system, which is getting astronauts to the moon. And the second one is some work researching in situ resource recovery on the moon. So the first one of those, now you probably remember back in April, NASA had awarded SpaceX a contract for getting astronauts down to the moon. So that's getting from lunar orbit down to the surface of the moon. Congress had put some pretty serious budget limits on that, and NASA finally concluded that they could only afford one, and they could barely afford that. SpaceX had the lowest bid on that, so they got it. And that was somewhat of a surprise, because originally it was assumed that there would be two competing contractors working on this, but they simply didn't have the money to do it. They wanted to move forward. Now, this was appealed by Blue Origin and Dynetics teams. There are three teams that are kind of suggested in this drawing right here. There's the Blue Origin team, which also teams up with Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman, Dynetics, and then SpaceX. And these are showing roughly to scale what the solutions look like. Give you an idea of the differences between these. Anyway, so what happened was funding had to be stopped because of this appeal. And today, during this month, the Government Accountability Office, they concluded that the appeal should not be granted, so they rejected it. Now the project will move forward. Now, that's not to say that if more money isn't appropriated, then a second team could also be, empowered to also continue developing their lander. That's probably what will happen. Now, Jeff Bezos, who heads up Blue Origin, in what sounds like desperation, he's actually offered to forego $2 billion in payments for the next 2 years, and even add a test flight, and also guarantee a fixed price for a future lander. So he really wants back in. They're a little behind. They definitely want back in. So he put an offer on the table for that. Has not responded officially to this yet. Okay, the other lunar news is, we had a helicopter on Mars. Well, now we're also talking about a drone on the moon. Now, in this case, obviously, a drone is not going to be a helicopter. It's purely going to be propelled, with thrusters. But NASA is funding a small project with Arizona State University, teamed up with Intuitive Machines, that's a Houston-based company. And their plan is to put what's essentially a drone there that can hop around, make it in several hops. It can go in, and it can take pictures and temperatures, in particular, get a close-up look at what's inside some of the craters near the South Pole. That's about $41 million grant, and it's called a hopper lander. In the terms, the naming from Intuitive Machines, they call it a Micronova, drone on the moon. Now, this is going in December 2022. We're talking about something fairly imminent here. This is a year and a half away. So the drone itself is about 76 centimeters cubed. The right-hand side here shows you, kind of a big version of that. And if you look at the bottom, you can see there's some thrusters down there. The picture on the left shows the lander it would come with. Intuitive Machines is making this small hopper, but it's also making the lander as well. And these are landers for robotic landings. These are not anything to do with people. These are much smaller. This thing is about the size of a Volkswagen Beetle, about 4 meters tall. They'll be getting there on a Falcon 9 rocket, and it'll take high resolution photos and also take temperatures inside the permanently shaded regions. Now, these are of quite a high interest, because originally, people thought there wasn't a whole lot of water on the moon other than what's bound up in minerals, as oxygen only, not as water. But the permanently shaded regions, they are so cold, and they stay cold because the sun never hits them. And it's thought that the ice that gets in there could stay there. And in fact, maybe even some ice that gets evaporated by the sun hitting the rest of the surface may migrate there. So it's quite likely that water has accumulated. This is the theory. And now we're going to go and take a look to see if that's really true. Now, another one is getting oxygen out of the lunar regolith, the dirt that's on the surface of the moon. This one is a joint venture between an Israeli company and a Japanese company. Helios has come up with a technology, as embodied in this picture down here on the right, for what's essentially electrolyzing the lunar regolith. From that, they would get the oxygen out of the minerals and also some metals. Now, oxygen is pretty important for a lot of reasons. Obviously, you need it for breathing. If you're going to be living in space, you want to have a source of oxygen, but also for being able to continue to travel outward, you need oxygen for propellant. And depending on the propellant, usually there is a propellant and the oxidizer. 70% of the total propellant weight in a lot of cases is the oxygen. So if you can actually produce that in situ, that is in place, you don't have to bring that from Earth. So there's a high value to this. There's a lot of oxygen in the regolith. They're claiming about 40%. Now they might additionally attempt to cast some of the metal that they extract into a mold. It's not as clear if that's actually going to happen or not. But if they did that, that would be the first human artifact actually produced on the mold, as opposed to just dropped there. Anyway, lots of people seem to be building these landers. We talked about one previously, and the one from iSpace looks like this. It would be delivered. I'm not sure which rocket this is assumed. This might be actually delivered as as an offshoot, a tag-along mission with one of the Artemis missions. I'm not sure where this one comes in. Moving further out into space, the Falcon Heavy has now officially been chosen for the 2024 Europa Clipper mission. Now, Europa is it's a moon of Jupiter, and it's interesting for a variety of reasons. It has an icy surface, and then underneath that is believed to be an ocean of water. And so, of course, there's as soon as you have that, you think, well, there's always a possibility of life. There's sources of heat there, sources of energy. Who knows, something might have happened there. Now, back in January, we had reported that the SLS, the Space Launch System, that had been dropped from consideration for this mission for a variety of reasons. One was the high cost, another was the schedule that had been delayed quite a bit. And also they found that there was a lot of vibration problems, and they really would have to end up redesigning the system. But one of the bigger problems was simply that even if they wanted to fly the SLS, the few that are being built are all dedicated to the Artemis moon program. So they weren't going to be available until later. There's a nice launch window in 2024 they wanted to hit. They had decided to drop the SLS, but they never said, now what? Well, now they're saying what. And that what is that they're paying $178 million to SpaceX for their rocket. So that's going to save about $1 billion in what it costs for the SLS rocket. And they're estimating maybe another $1 billion in the redesign and testing and all that to fix the vibration problems. And all that, of course, would also likely mean launch delays. Now, one disadvantage of the Falcon Heavy is that it's not as powerful as the SLS. So it will be a longer trip. It'll have to actually get some gravity assists along the way. It'll take about 6 years. The SLS approach, they could have just blasted right through in maybe 3.5 years. So that would be the one disadvantage. But on the other hand, if they couldn't make the takeoff time anyway, that helps mitigate that particular problem. Okay, so now we're at the point where we ask people to think about how many launches do you think there have been since the last meeting? Remember, a launch only counts here if it's attempting orbital or beyond. So all the suborbital flights, like from Blue Origin and so on, don't really count here because that takes a lot less energy to accomplish that. The picture shown here is the Proton rocket from Russia that did carry up that Nauka Science Lab. So that's a fairly current one. So I'll give you a few minutes. You should have a place on your screen to vote on how many launches you think there have been. I'll count down a few more seconds here. I guess we'll end it. So it looks like most people voted 9 or 10. That was my hint from several months ago. It's about roughly half at 9 and maybe a quarter at 10, and one was somewhere else. Well, it turns out the right answer was 9. And here they are. We've already talked about the going to the space station on the Proton rocket from Russia. Nothing else that notable about this one, except notice one thing: only one of these launches was American. Most of them were Chinese. And in fact, the one American one is on Electron, which is really Rocket Lab, which is really still, for all practical purposes, is really still a New Zealand company. They've officially rehoused themselves in America, but they haven't actually finished any facilities in the US yet. So you could actually say there were almost no US launches, which is pretty unusual. Okay, since I've been doing these summaries of launches. You know, I see lots of pictures of what these things look like when they take off. And I have to say, I'm going to give an award for the most scenic launch site. And that has got to be by far the Xichang Satellite Launch Center that's in Southwest China. The inset in the map in the upper left corner here kind of gives you an idea where that is. This place has been in operation since 1984. Now it's very scenic, but you know that means there's a price to be paid. These are very far inland, which means that when they launch rockets, they're going to drop boosters and they're going to drop the nose cones, the fairings, into inhabited areas, and that has caused protests in China. There's a reason they're all built inland. It isn't really because it's scenic. It's actually because they wanted to be sure that they were out of reach of the U.S. Navy if things ever got ugly. So the early sites, in fact, were all very far inland, just like this one is. Now there are, in fact, there are quite a few sites along the coast, which follows the practice of everybody else. This particular launch, which is one of the 9 I just mentioned, they are experimenting with guiding the fairings to a controlled landing site. So they're using a parachute. And there's a photo of it up here in the upper right-hand corner. That you know, there's a parachute there, and that's actually just fairing is typically split into 2 when the payload is released. So that's probably just one of them. It wasn't clear if they did a second one or not. This was more experimental than anything else. Okay, well, with that, I will stop and see if anybody has any questions or wants to make any comments before introducing the main speaker.
It's a lot going on. Somehow I missed that whole thing about Helios. How did you find out about it?
It was one of those things where I was, you know, how you get lost, you just sort of follow a story and then you follow, and somewhere along the line, it just ran across it. You know, I couldn't even tell you at this point.
I was checking out them on LinkedIn, and I noticed I had actually interviewed one of the people associated with it with my countdown to the moon thing. They were part of Space IL, the X Prize moon group from Israel. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, well, that might be the Japanese company, iSpace. They're the one, they advertise that. In fact, they show a picture of, they have a thing that looks kind of like the original moon lander, or the moon rover, I'm sorry, you know, the one that was driven by the astronauts, but scaled down. So
Ian,
you
sorry, I was going to say, Ian asked a question in the chat room. What are spy satellites, and do we know specifics of on their missions?
Well, just in general, they're monitoring what's going on Earth. So, you know, typically they might be radar based, or they might be, you know, just taking pictures. So it's kind of generic. I mean, you know, a more polite way of saying it is Earth observation satellites, because there's not much of a line between observing the Earth for commercial purposes. I mean, for instance, for looking at forest fires, or looking at, you know, where growth has been, or looking for climate change damage, that kind of thing, versus just outright spying. But when they're launched by the military, we tend to call them spy satellites. So I think the main difference is simply, if it's launched by the military, you assume it's for spying. If it's launched more for commercial purposes, then you assume it's just basically to sell data to whoever wants it.
Cool.
Okay, anything else? Okay, we'll move on to our featured speaker, Gitika Gorthi. You already heard she is the founder and CEO of Ignited Thinkers, which is an organization dedicated to educating people in space, and it's for everyone. She's also doing aerospace medicine research with Baylor and Brown universities. She is an intern at NASA Ames Center in their gene lab, a rocketry enthusiast, and she's a senior at a high school in Northern Virginia. So she'll talk about 3 things. The Ignited Thinkers work. She'll also talk about the aerospace medicine research. And I think something that might be of interest to many people also is what kind of career paths people have. You know, most people think of astronauts as being, you know, the career path, and then maybe aeronautical engineer because they're designing rockets. But the reality is there's a lot more that needs to be done in space. I mean, life support alone requires every kind of engineering. But we'll find out what she has to say. So Gitika, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction, Dr. Stanley, and thank you so much for having me. It's so exciting. I can share my screen. Okay, Okay, so like I was saying, like Dr. Stanley introduced, my name is Gitika Gorthi, and I'm a rising senior at Chantilly High School. And I founded Ignited Thinkers in 8th grade, and I'll kind of run you through the journey of what really led me into the space industry. But I do want to really stress the fact that whenever I give a webinar to any students, you guys are not students, obviously, but whenever I do webinars for students, I really like to stress the point that I'm just a normal high school student and that there's nothing unique about me that makes me super smart or have like photogenic memory. I feel like a lot of times people look at the space industry and like, oh, it's filled with rocket scientists, but there's also a lot of like normal careers and then a lot of skill sets and passion that's involved more than just genius skills. So that's kind of like what I wanted to start off with my introduction. And I'm going to kind of run you guys through how I founded Ignited Thinkers and whoops. Okay, and what I did. So I was like every other little girl, you know, I went to the Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C. and was really intrigued by, you know, the space, the aircrafts, the rockets. It all intrigued me. However, I never really saw it as like a real career when I was a little girl, maybe because none of my parents were in the industry. I've never met anyone who worked in the space industry. So it's just different. And when I got to middle school, there was a rocketry club at my middle school that my tech ed engineering and design teacher was like, Gitika, you should join. I have an extra spot. And I did end up joining, not knowing anything about model rocketry, and absolutely fell in love with building model rockets. I just started off with using basic Estes model rocket kits, and I would spend 3 to 4 hours just every day building rockets. I just found it so fun. And then it kind of clicked that moment that I can actually build rockets. Like, even though I'm in 7th grade, I can build rockets. Maybe this is a career path I should consider, because earlier I never thought I would be fit for the industry or like something that I could actually do. So when I got that realization, I started really exploring my passions for space. And in the back of my head was also my interest for biology, because I've always, I think around 4th grade, I was like, I started reading about the human body and I was so intrigued. And I was like, okay, this is also a career path that I want to consider. And that summer after 7th grade, I applied for, I was like researching and I found that NASA had a sisters program at NASA Goddard Center. And this was like just completely off a web search. And I was like, that's amazing. So I can literally be at NASA for 2 whole weeks and get to know about what they do and their initiatives. And I thought this was like the perfect program if I could get in. And that summer when I applied, I ended up getting in and it was the best experience of my life. Those 2 weeks, I was able to meet over 10 to 15 NASA scientists, get some tour of the facilities that they have, go to like the launch control area. And it was just like, this is the environment I want to work in and be a part of. So that was kind of how I kind of found my love for NASA and space. That same summer, I also applied to a program at Brown University for neuroscience. Like I was mentioning, really intrigued by the human body. And so I really wanted to explore that further. And during that program, I was able to discover more about the brain. I did a little, like few projects with a few of my teammates in that program and fell in love again with neuroscience. However, both these careers were in the back of my mind as I entered high school. And, you know, I'll get into like my career track a little bit later. But before I entered high school in 8th grade, I had a conversation with my parents during like a rocket launch site. I took them, I kind of dragged them along on a Saturday morning. It was like, watch me launch my rocket. And they've never, ever seen or been to a rocket launch before. So they were also excited. And on the car ride back home, my dad was like, Gitika, you're so lucky to have had this opportunity to build rockets. If I had this opportunity when I was like 15, I probably would have gotten into the space industry too. I'm so glad you're able to like explore all of this. And both of my parents are immigrants from India, so they didn't have these opportunities that I was really blessed to have in like a very urban place in America. And that like kind of clicked me, like the way my dad said that statement kind of brought out the inner Girl Scout in me. I've been a Girl Scout since kindergarten, and I was like, I have to change that. Like, that's not fair, because I probably wouldn't have gotten into the space industry without this rocketry club, without my tech ed teacher telling me about this club. I want to be able to bring this rocketry experience and this space experience and create this tech ed teacher for every single person around the world. And so that was the idea and motivation behind really starting Ignited Thinkers in 8th grade. And I did my first event with an orphanage in India. And I did it in India because I had an acquaintance here. Her name is Dr. Scrivener. And I was telling her about my idea of starting this organization. And she was like, you should do your first event at my orphanage. And so she has a few across the world. And I went there that summer and did my first event with 75 students. And it was the best experience of my life. And I knew that this is what I wanted to do. And so ever since then, I've been conducting webinars and workshops to students across the world. And I put a heavy focus on Title I school students here in the US, just because a lot of them don't have the opportunity to explore different clubs or pay to go to different clubs like I've had the opportunity to. So that was definitely something that I've really focused on. Additionally, this year, I've had the really cool opportunity to talk with a few districts to incorporate space education into school curriculums more. In 6th grade, there's like a small short astronomy unit, but apart from that, literally there's no space in like education systems. So I really wanted to enhance and be like more hands-on, simple activities that any teacher could teach. And I developed this curriculum that I'm trying to pitch to different science departments in Virginia. And one county is really perceptive and open to it. So that's kind of, I'm working with them in order to kind of pilot this program, hopefully next year or the year after. So that's really exciting. And so as I was entering high school back in like 9th and 10th grade, I was thinking about careers. My counselor was asking everyone, what do you guys want to be? And I was like, oh, I'm going to have to come to that decision of picking whether I want to go to space or medicine. And one day I randomly searched up space and medicine and put the two words together. It was just kind of like a desperate last attempt to see if that was a real career almost. And it was a real career. As you can see, like I literally searched it up and I found out it was a real career. It was a huge shock to me. And I started doing a lot of research, like what is aerospace medicine? What does it mean? I could be a physician in space. What is that? How does that help? And I started researching on it and found that actually learning about how the human body behaves in space will actually help us in translating into understanding about the human body here on Earth and how different diseases are differing and how we can learn more about them, which I'll dive into a little bit later. But that realization of that this exists was like the moment that I knew like, this is what I wanted to do. And so ever since then, I've been working towards finding research opportunities to just get myself involved and learn more about space medicine. And so I've had this realization because of a quick Google search. So then that kind of got to my mind, like I shouldn't just be giving webinars and workshops, I should be spreading awareness on these vast career opportunities that exist. So if a student is interested in policy, they don't have to just become a lawyer, they could go into space policy. If they're interested in art, they don't have to just be, artists, they could go into space art. And journalism, space journalism. So like that, there's so many different careers. And I started this channel, the Ignited Thinkers YouTube channel, where I highlight diverse space champions and their careers. I've had, like for example, Mr. Cantrell come in and talk about his work. He was the co-founder of SpaceX. He was the first, I think he was the vice president of business. So he came in and talked with me on my channel, as well as like Mr. Courtney Stad. He was the White House liaison for NASA. And I've had these amazing individuals come in and talk about their experiences and their unique pathways to the space industry, just to shed light that there's not one person or one journey or one type of career that takes you into the industry. So apart from the Ignited Thinkers initiative, additionally, I kind of started looking into the research that I could be involved in. And I realized, like Dr. Stanley was saying, I do research with the Baylor College of Medicine. I randomly reached out and was like, hey, I'm really interested. You guys are one of the only medical schools with a space radiation, space medicine center. I was wondering if there was any way that I could get involved. And I got response back from Dr. Jeffrey Jones, and he was able to kind of involve me in this manuscript that they were writing on space radiation countermeasures. And so I've been working with them. I also work with a Brown University professor on computer science and neuroscience, but he's also interested in the space aspect of things. So I've been working with him. And I also wrote a paper with the Belgian Nuclear Center on the importance of telemedicine, which I'll dive into a little bit later. And most recently, I was a NASA Ames research intern where I was able to explore further my interest for space biology. So I know I kind of stayed on this slide for a really long time, but that was kind of like the journey of how I started from middle school to where I am right now. So Ignited Thinkers has a lot of organizations that it's collaborated with. As you can see on the slide, there's like around 10 plus organizations that have supported the webinars that I did and workshops. And I just like, my main goal is just to make space accessible to all. And there's so many smaller organizations already doing this. So you guys might ask, how is Ignited Thinkers different? And that's because my target audience is really the younger age with elementary and middle school. I feel like there's a lot of fellowships like the Brooke Owens Fellowship or different programs geared towards helping college students. And a lot of those interests and passions that students develop are really when they're young. That's when they really figure out what they really want to do. So that's kind of the focus of Ignited Thinkers, is to empower, ignite, educate, and inspire these younger students. So what is the vision for Ignited Thinkers? I want to continuously grow it. And the main thing is I want space clubs in every single school. And as part of that, I think I started 4 to 5 rocketry clubs this year in the pandemic, in a virtual school year, was able to start 4 to 5 STEAM clubs in Title I schools, which I think is a really big win on my side. And I would like to continue to grow that. Additionally, incorporating space education into every school curriculum. And then illustrate diversity, not only diversity in the workforce, but diversity in the job opportunities, as well as who can be a part of the industry. You don't have to just be a mathematician or a physicist or a chemist to be a part of the industry, but rather there's so many skill sets that are required, including marketing, business, finance, that are required. So just stressing those points is also something that I'd like to do. I also like to break stereotypes. I feel like the industry is super heavily stereotyped. When I told my friends I was going into the space industry, they're like, oh, like, I don't know if that has a lot of careers, like a lot of opportunities for girls. And I think there's just stereotypes, because there's so many opportunities for girls in the space industry these days, not only girls, but people of color and just everyone in general. There's so many opportunities. It's just a matter of, going and seeking those opportunities out. So I'd like to definitely break the stereotypes that are in the industry and show people that there's space for everyone. And so now I'm going to dive a little bit into my research, more of the aerospace medicine aspect. And I want to specifically talk, you guys are probably all already know about this, but just to kind of reiterate the importance of aerospace medicine, and then dive into some of the research that I most recently conducted at NASA Ames Research Center. So what is the importance of aerospace medicine? Just to kind of put this in context, when you go to space, obviously our body reacts in different ways. One of the most prominent ones that we must know of is like the loss of bone density. And to combat that, astronauts they exercise a lot in space to combat loss of bone density. However, that loss of bone density that happens in space allows us to figure out, like, when humans are in space, certain genes are going up and certain genes are behaving differently. And could that relate to bone density loss? And if so, how does that relate to bone density loss here on Earth? A lot of the older population here on Earth loses a lot of bone density as well. It's at a different time frame. Obviously, it's a much longer time frame, but they're still losing bone density. So are there certain genes that we don't know about on Earth that we figure out in space that we can use here? That's kind of a question that arises. Another thing is, for example, cancer cells. There's been a lot of research in the ISS on different cells and how they behave in space. And there was a recent study that I was actually reading by NASA where they were saying certain cells reveal different characteristics without the element of gravity in play. A lot of times we take gravity for granted just because we're born with it, we live with it, but that's a factor influencing a lot of the conditions that we face today in our body, different cardiovascular diseases or neurological diseases. So if we can take out that element of gravity, what happens to different cells and different conditions and different diseases in our body? That's something that'll help us understand better to develop better treatments to different conditions we have here on Earth. So I think those are the most important points. And also it enables us to allow deep space exploration. As we're looking into going into the Artemis mission, which is really exciting, but also going to Mars, I think the closest time to Mars is 6 months, which is a long time. And we don't have the facilities yet to be able to travel that far and make sure nothing happens to the human body. Even once we enter Mars, what's the factors that's going to influence our body? We don't know. What is the amount of radiation our body can really take? What does Mars have? We don't know about that. So we need to develop telemedicine using artificial intelligence to really combat this and make sure we find solutions and have the equipment ready to protect the astronauts that do explore these different environments we've never been in before. So now kind of diving in a little bit specific to my research is at NASA Ames Research Center. I focused I was part of the Gene Lab program, and in the Gene Lab, they have this open access platform that everybody can access. It's called Galaxy. And in that, they have different data sets that they put from what they collected from sample test flights. And so I analyzed this data set about Drosophila, or most commonly known as fruit flies. And I was trying to figure out how they behave differently in spaceflight as compared to a ground control. So my project was analyzing the role of specifically actin on cardiac dysfunction in microgravity. So I'll talk a little bit about how I came to this research project. So first off, a lot of the model organisms that are used on space missions, the most common one being rodents, but also different fruit flies like Drosophila are being used to gather test samples to kind of compare to the human functionality in space. And the reason Drosophila are actually really good for understanding how humans behave in space is because 75% of the genes that the heart-related genes that Drosophila have, heart-related conditions and diseases Drosophila have are similar to the conditions humans have. And fruit flies are super small, so I can't believe that they actually translate into understanding human bodies, but they do. So that's really cool. Additionally, Drosophila are super small size, so that helps us in terms of the transportation and putting them and storing them in the microgravity environment. Additionally, they have well-defined and conserved genes and short lifespans, which allows us to better analyze, how a whole human from like beginning earlier humans to like elder humans, how they behave with, younger Drosophila to older Drosophila. So the specific metadata that I dealt with was on the Dragon flight, and it was, I think it was like a SpaceX flight, and it was taken on that flight, and they had a ground control sample of a few fruit flies here on Earth, and they took a few in space, and then they collected data on specifically the heart, the cardiovascular system. And using the data that they collected, I conducted a data analysis and developed a volcano plot using the Galaxy platform. And I filtered for the significant data genes, like which genes were actually significantly different. So which genes behave differently in space than on Earth. And we filtered a few of the genes, as you can see here. The ones on the blue were the genes that were downregulated in space compared to here on Earth. And the red genes that you can see are the ones that were upregulated in space. So basically the blue genes show you that these genes were downregulated in space, whereas on Earth they weren't. And so we started researching about every single gene. What does that gene mean? What is its function? What does it do? Does that actually impact our body? And there were these two specific genes that I found that we thought were, like my team and I, we were a group of 3, found to be the most interesting. These were 2 actin genes, ACT88F and ACT79B. I'm just going to call them actin genes to keep clarity. So these were the genes of interest that we chose. And so why did we choose these genes? That's because we found that on Earth, both of these genes compensate for each other. So for example, if one actin gene for some reason is downregulated, the other one becomes upregulated and compensates. However, in space, both of them are downregulated. They both are not compensating for each other. So if they're not compensating for each other, what impact could this have on the cardiovascular system of a Drosophila? And in turn, what cardiovascular impact could it have on the human heart? So this question arose, and we did research on it and found the role of actin genes in the cardiovascular system. And these are actually essential for the contractility in the heart. So they play not a major, but they do play a minor role in heart contractility. So keeping this relation in mind, since they both are downregulating microgravity, we also were wondering, what does this mean for humans? These are like fruit fly genes. Does that necessarily mean it translates to humans? So then we used Flybase, which is a data set that they have, and we found that these actin genes, and we found a human ortholog gene to it. And so the human ortholog gene also plays a minor role in human heart contractility. So this was kind of not a breakthrough, but it was like a discovery where there was a change in space in heart contractility, and it could mean something. It might not mean anything, but it could mean something. So we proposed to NASA. We're still waiting and hoping we can get a grant for this. It's only $5,000, but we were waiting back to hear from what their thoughts are. But we proposed an experiment to address these knowledge gaps of figuring out what happens when these genes are downregulated. And we're going to test this using Drosophila and the human ortholog genes to figure out, does our contractility change? And if so, what does that mean for human spaceflight? Our hypothesis, one from the research that we did, is that microgravity downregulates these key actin genes, which leads to reduced cardiac contractility and impaired cardiac function. In space, there was a few research articles that we actually read that there was like abnormal heart contractility in space. It's not like a significant one, but it was abnormal. And on Earth, there is abnormality in heart contractility for many cardiovascular diseases. So that was kind of like, okay, so could this research play a role in helping us identify why certain contractility diseases here occur on Earth? So that was kind of like the question we had in mind and purpose for our research. I'm not going to go too in detail for our aims because I kind of feel like I explained the purpose of our research. But the main significance you guys might ask is, why does this matter? Why should NASA spend $5,000 on like doing this, allowing us to conduct this experiment? And that's mainly because this research not only has human, as we look into long-term deep space exploration missions, it could have an impact on their heart, but also we haven't been doing space exploration for so long that we know what the impacts are for astronauts once they come back to Earth. We don't know what the long-term implications of spaceflight really are. We're just assuming that the short-term implications are not bad for the heart, but we don't know what the long term really means. And as we're looking into colonization, as we're looking into going to different planets or much further, it's important to just understand everything. There's no harm if there are certain genes that are behaving differently. You might as well look into it. So that's like a little synopsis of my research. Hopefully it made sense. But this is exactly why I'm interested in aerospace medicine, because there's just so much translation between space medicine and also medicine here on Earth. And since I've always wanted to become a physician, this was like the perfect mix between both of my passions. And hopefully you guys could see that I was really interested into it. Yeah, so that's basically, hopefully we can unmask certain asymptomatic cardiovascular diseases in the future because of this research that we are conducting. But that was just a basic synopsis of aerospace medicine, and hopefully you guys are able to get a better insight into it. Do you guys have any questions for me?
Well, that was really awesome. Thank you so much for running through that. If you do have questions, don't forget about the little reactions thing at the bottom and raise your hand and I could call on you. But while we're waiting for people to put their hand up, I had a few questions for you. So I guess you mentioned that you're starting rocketry clubs at various places. And we as an organization are looking for a way to kind of interact with, the community and try to engage more people. And it sounds like that what you have there might be something we should look at considering. And I was wondering if you could kind of talk through maybe the process by which you set up these rocketry clubs and things you have to consider.
Yeah, so one thing I didn't mention about myself is I'm actually a basketball player. I've been playing since 3rd grade. And there was this quote that I kind of reminded when you asked me the question. And it was, "You miss 100% of the shots you don't take." And this quote has been like literally guiding me with whatever I do. And I've reached out to about maybe 40 to 50 schools if I have to approximate. And I just emailed every single school that I could come across and was like, like I told about myself, I emailed and was like, I'm really interested in starting a STEAM club. And there was like maybe 5 to 10 schools that responded back, but I still consider that a huge win. So I never even though I didn't get a response from a lot of people, I always try to take that shot in and just try. So my biggest thing when I started these clubs was I just reached out to my community. I focused on the schools that lacked those resources or like already lacked those types of clubs and I know would be interested. I remember when I went to my first meeting with the STEAM club at one Title I school, they were like, "I want to be like you when I grow up. I want to go into space." And so when I heard that, I was like, these kids are interested. They just don't have the opportunities or the resources and lack of awareness. So I definitely think that just reaching out to your community and just sending those emails, even if it's 5 a week or just do it and you will get someone who responds back.
And can you talk a little bit about like the rocketry clubs, how often they meet, what are some activities they do? Do they get together and launch their rockets? And like, what are the considerations of finding a place to do that type of thing, the mechanics behind it?
Yeah, of course. So in the clubs, they do different things. It's more like some of them are STEAM clubs, some of them are space-related clubs. So ones that were STEAM clubs, they have a different science topic or like different STEAM topic that they do every week. They have different guest speakers that come in. I go in for different lectures on different space topics that they're interested in. We also like to do like more of hands-on things. So taking home supplies and trying to do like a mini experiment. So whether it be me explaining like astrobiology using sourdough or, building model rockets rockets using home supplies and kind of talking about the physics behind it, like the Newton's laws. So just basic things around that. I think we like to do a lot of home things. The thing that I would like to mention is I started most of these clubs during the pandemic, so we haven't had a chance to actually meet in person and build rockets and go to a launch site. But there's the National Association of Rocketry, and they have a Novar launch site that's actually maybe 45 minutes away from my house. So that's kind of the launch site I recommend everyone in the area that I meet. I'm like, go to the Novar launch site. They meet every month. So that's kind of where we would go to build and fly rockets. We also have approval from my local middle school to launch rockets there. Even though we're like 10 minutes away from the airport, we got approval to be able to launch rockets. So we do that every day we can. Yeah, there's like just local clubs that we reached out to and getting approval from the county to be able to fly these model rockets. We can't go past the A motor. So in a model rocket, we can't go to B motor in the middle school that we have, but just the A motor we could do in middle school. So basically a lot of hands-on home materials and then, nearest big fields, and we just go there to launch rockets. Yeah.
And I see John put a question in the chat room. John, did you want to ask your question or you want me to read it off? Okay, I assume that, oh, there you are. Actually the audio is not good. Yeah, so I can read it off if you want. Okay, so John's first question was, did you check how daily medicines may average ACT 88F and 79B for averaging blood pressure and protein control and microgravity, HDL/LDL?
No, we didn't do that. We didn't actually look into US medications, right? We didn't look into that. So we haven't actually conducted this experiment. We're hoping to potentially get funding. I can run through my methodology if you guys would like. I just thought it would be really boring to talk about the methodology because it's really long. But we didn't look into the medications. These were purely what we were trying to see is if we took out these specific genes and we, didn't downregulate them, what would happen? And if we put these genes in and they were upregulated, what would happen to the contractility? So we just wanted to measure what those gene functions are. Because when we search up on the internet what these ACT88F, ACT79B gene functions are, you can't really get a straight answer of what their specific role in contractility is. So we want to be able to determine if it has an effect. So hopefully that answers your question.
Okay. And you mentioned you could talk through your methodology. I guess how long is the explanation?
It's really long because it was a proposal, so we did have to go through a lot of details. But I could send maybe the link to the presentation if you guys are interested, and you can go through. It has like diagrams and everything. So if you guys are interested in running through that, it's just like because I have different aims. There's like 4 different aims we'd like to really. I think. When like NASA's giving funding, one of the tips that our mentors gave is that one experiment needs to have a lot of purposes and a lot of backups. So if one aim didn't work, we need to have multiple aims that we can get from the experiment. So we did kind of figure out a lot of details. So it would take a lot of time to go through the methodology, but I can definitely put in the link for the presentation.
Oh yeah, that'd be fantastic. And then we might have some follow-up questions. So it's still not working, John. Yeah, the audio is quite, it's like the first time I've heard this on a Zoom call, actually. But I saw your second question in the chat. The second question that John had was, did you look at the twin studies and they concluded that the exercise may resolve up to 3-year mission on the moon?
Yeah, I did look at the twin study. I was reading about it, but I didn't actually look into the specific details of what it really was, but I was looking at the twin studies research. And I think it's really cool how, they're literally twins and still you can get like a lot of different results for them. So I think it's really cool, but I have to look into that specifically.
Well, awesome. Anybody else have a question, or John, maybe if you have another one, you can type it in the chat room. I can read it off. Yeah, I guess, Ian has his hand up. Go ahead, Ian.
Hey, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Awesome. Hey, I have a question about your curriculum with the high school, or is this curriculum geared towards high school or middle school?
It's geared towards elementary school because in high school there is a physics class that students can take, but in elementary school there's only like a small unit in astronomy. So I'd love to include the hands-on aspect. But yeah, go ahead. What's your question?
Awesome. And I had my follow-up would be what is all kind of entailed with the elementary school like curriculum? Is it kind of really focused on just the model rockets and like kind of the intros and basics for space?
Yeah, so there's a few aspects to it that I tried to put in because not everybody would, want like the engineering aspect, but I definitely, so in sixth grade, in my county in Virginia, I went off of the Virginia state standards of what needs to be taught to sixth graders and fifth graders, and that's I kind of developed my curriculum. So in sixth grade, students need to be able to develop this experiment using an engineering design process. So for that standard, I said that why not build like a model rocket, using like paper tubes and different home supplies that they can find, and try to make like an egg, like you can put like an egg in the parachute and try to save the egg from not cracking, or just something simple like that where they can build like an actual model rocket using their different experiments and try to build the best model rocket that'll stay in the air the longest and not crack the egg, for example. So that was one experiment that I suggested that's very simple that teachers could even, teachers who have no background in space could teach. Another thing is in sixth grade, there's also a small unit on chemistry and the elements and like biology. And so I wanted to kind of incorporate astrobiology into it and kind of be like life outside of space. Why can we find life on Mars right now? What are we looking for? What constitutes a place where organisms can survive? Why do we have astronaut suits? What does that mean? So just kind of incorporating these different like space topics, maybe a presentation that I could create and share with all of the teachers. I think that's something that I really wanted to kind of push and be like, there's no space discussion at all until you go to a physics class. And even then, there's really no discussion of space. And space has a lot it's so interdisciplinary. We could really fit it into every single subject. So I'm trying to encourage science teachers, especially, to try to incorporate the different astrobiology and the mechanical aspects of space into the curriculum.
Awesome. That's very exciting stuff.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, you talked about several different attributes of these rockets that you might try to optimize. How long it stays up, how well it protects the payload on landing. What are some other things that you try to design a rocket for, other kind of characteristics?
Yeah, so I actually did the science fair experiment. I think it was in eighth grade. Yeah, it was in eighth grade. And it was like which fin shape, changing the fin shape, which one will give you the highest apogee. That was one experiment that I did just to like, kind of talk about aerodynamics. And it was the Intel science fair in like eighth grade. So I did that one. That was an experiment that I conducted. Additionally, after seventh grade, when I used the model rocket kits, I also used like different programs like RockSim and like CADing to design different fins. My tech ed classroom, my teacher, he was a huge rocketry fan. We were actually the only middle school with a rocketry club because he loved rocketry. And he actually got the school a laser printer. And so what I would do is I would design these different fin shapes or different parts, and he would laser print them using the balsa wood that he had. And I would design like my own rockets, and I would try to build different rockets. Also, there was a certification program called NARTREC certification. That was another program I really try to tell all students that I talk with to pursue. And there's like different challenges. They have the Mercury, the Gemini, and different levels of certifications you can get. And so I finished the Gemini, but I couldn't go past that. I'm trying to earn my high powered rocket license now, but it kind of got put on hold because of the pandemic. But before I did those certifications, and they had different challenges. And so I would try to accomplish those different challenges through the NARTREC certification program. So those are the different things that I did. But when I work with students, I always encourage them to have the highest flying and longest flying without the fast landing rockets. So it's definitely fun.
How did you measure how high the rockets go?
Yeah, there was like this device that we had. I think it was called like the Alta. I'm forgetting the exact name of what company it was. It was like a really small device, and it measured the altitude that it went up. So that's kind of the device that I used. And then when we were tracking how it would go down, right as it like the parachute went out, I would just start the timer, and we would see how long it would take to come down.
And any other interesting payloads that you've seen people do?
Not really. I haven't see once I discovered my love for like astromedicine, like the aerospace medicine, I kind of deviated a little bit away from the engineering aspect and started going into the really like the research aspect of things. So definitely not very interesting ones you guys might have not heard of. Yeah, no, I can't think of any on top of my head.
Has any of the other people here done any model rocketry? It might be kind of cool to hear some other people that have also had the experience and kind of share that.
I think Mr. John does.
Oh, yes. Oh, Andrew Paris says that he did whenever he was 9, and John did. Okay, awesome. Oh, great.
Yeah.
So
Hey, I did some too in high school, Nathan. I built it out of balsa wood kite structure and just some ST's engines. So it was very bare bones, very sleek. It went very high, and at the top of it, instead of having instrumentation, I put a few firecrackers in it so that I could time the time delay between seeing the flash and how long it
That's awesome.
took to get there for estimation of altitude from that technique.
we had one speaker come and talk to our group, I think last year, who was into sort of like, I guess, these complex launch systems. The idea of using a ground system to throw the rocket up and then have it actually ignite in the air so that you already have given it some momentum and you can make it go higher. I was wondering if you've done any experiments along that direction.
I have not done this experiment. No, I haven't. That sounds very interesting that I should look into. No, I have not done that research. Yeah.
And
I used to be a professor at architecture school, and the egg that you were mentioning, we used to make a competition out of it, but the reverse way. So we throw the egg inside of the structure from the rooftop to down, and whose egg wasn't exploded, that was the winner. So it was the reverse way.
I think that's always a fun experiment. And I feel like 6th graders would absolutely enjoy that. And I feel like it's not too complicated, but still fun and builds like teamwork, and they can use the engineering design process. I feel like it's a perfect activity.
Yeah, the hardest part was that because these were architecture students, they were not allowed to use parachutes. So it should have been a structure that when you just throw it on the floor without any kind of parachute, it would survive.
Wow.
So,
Interesting designs.
So another interesting one, Nathan, one of my friends started a first robotics competition team back when the event first started going. It's like Team 86 in Florida. And so he had a garage shop in the backyard, and some of the students at the university in Florida decided, I think it was Central Florida or Florida Technical Institute, I think, decided they were going to do a real research launch project. And so they heard about his machine shop and sent all their students over to his machine shop, where he was to help them get the casing machined for it. It's called Jamstar. And so he put all of his high school girls in charge of teaching all the college guys how to run the machine shop to build the casing.
Did robotics too. I'm actually part of Team 9073. Yeah, I've been doing robotics again since like 1st grade. Yeah, I love first robotics.
Great program. Yeah, yeah. I'm field supervisor here in Houston for the events. Been for about 15 years doing that and judging and stuff. So yeah, great program too.
Yeah.
And they did actually get a real instrument launched with that and made some records. So look up Jamstar, Jamstar. But yeah, it was turned out to be pretty successful.
And let's see, John sent me another text message. He says, do you do any like type of collaboration with NASA to sponsor the school clubs, or is it just primarily you working directly with them?
I missed the question because I was looking at an Instagram page that Mr. John just sent to see his rockets. Sorry, what was the question?
Oh, let's see. I think the question, and John, maybe you could go ahead and type it in so everybody can see it, and then we could just read it off. But I guess while he's doing that, maybe we could pivot back over to some of your gene research. You say you need funding for the to do the experiment. I mean, what's your method to go put a GoFundMe page out there or something? What do you plan to do?
I would definitely need to use the NASA facility for sure, because some of the tools that we're using, like the measurement tools and stuff, cost like $15,000. I didn't put that in the budget because NASA Ames already has it. So we were because I was part of the Gene Lab program, they pick a team to fund completely. And so we're hoping that we're the team that gets funded, but everyone's project was amazing. So we're just hoping. And if that doesn't work out one day, if I work at NASA Ames, I will definitely see if we can do a project similar to that.
That's cool. And let's see. Yeah, David, if you want to go ahead and share that out, we could kind of pivot over to just open it up for everybody to talk about anything at this point, I guess. And then
I can quickly answer that question that was in the chat, which is Ignited Thinkers going to sponsor space clubs? Yeah, I would actually, that was the plan. So I have a little bit of money that I saved up personally that I put towards Ignited Thinkers, and I would love to sponsor clubs. A lot of these clubs, they're actually funded by the school PTA. So when we start these STEAM programs and these STEAM clubs, we get PTA funding for it, which is like the parent organization of the school. And so that's kind of basically how we've been creating a sustainable program, because I don't want it just to be like, if I, for some reason, don't have the money to support the club, it stops. I'm really like a big believer on sustainability. So that's kind of the goal that I've been working towards. But if a club ever needs sponsoring, I would 100% Ignited Thinkers would give it. Additionally, like I was mentioning, we have over 10 collaborators that we work with. So definitely putting them in touch with a certain organization that would support them, I would definitely do that as well.
Well, good deal. And David had something he wanted to share out. David, do you want to maybe give us a little context?
Yeah, okay. Can you hear me all right?
Uh-huh.
Okay, you should just have a blank screen right now if everything's working right here. Yeah, the space settlement design competitions that I've been working with for a long time too is for high school students to do a proposal for a future space settlement. It's in a setting in sometime in the future. There's a scenario future history that exists in the competition, and they have to prepare a proposal to develop a space settlement. And so between some of the different events that we've had over the last year, I've got a demonstration project that we've been doing to show importing some of the designs the students have come up with into virtual reality, where you can actually, through VR chat, and go in and visit these kind of places, these virtual worlds. And so we have I have a little quick demo of the results from the last 6 months of some of my students from India, primarily, that have been doing this particular design, and one of my volunteers that's been helping them get it. So I'm going to see if I can get this to play. If somebody could just give me a thumbs up or down if it's playing properly, I don't know, it's got a little soundtrack to it. Don't know, it doesn't matter if you don't hear it. Is that playing?
It is playing. I'm not getting the soundtrack.
That's fine. It's just a little music. So this was the settlement for Astoria, which is in the asteroid belt. It's to be designed from and built from materials in a selected asteroid. And it's got specifications as to what G levels have to be provided. And I forget so many thousand people that it's supposed to house. So this is, and this is the Outpost Tavern, which is a real place, or was a real place at JSC that the astronauts used to hang out at. So the students modeled the Outpost Tavern and put it in a space settlement in the 2080s. Now they say it's using all gaming software. So you can go, if you've got either desktop streaming mode or full virtual reality, you can go visit this world. It's set up as a public world. And with multiple people able to be in the world at the same time, you can go, you know, interact with other people there and talk with them and such. So for the last competition, we did an hour-long session demonstrating how this was done and how the process of taking the designs and putting them into VR chat worked. Yeah, this was the astronaut hangout. You might recognize this from the movie Space Cowboys. This was actually used in the Space Cowboys movie. So this was a Chinese restaurant. There was a theme of having neighborhoods that were designed based on Earth environments. We didn't have time to build an avatar with a spacesuit, so that's work in progress. The outpost unfortunately burned to the ground about 10 years ago. So I think the memorabilia there may have gotten saved. But anyway, that's one of our little projects that we've been doing.
Good deal. Thanks for sharing that, David. That looks
You're welcome.
interesting.
Yeah, anybody that's interested, you know, can get in. If you've got VR compatible equipment, you can go in and visit it.
Yeah, and I just to catch up on some of the chat. So John asked, is Ignited Thinkers looking for consultants or analysts? And Gitika, I think you said you're currently planning and developing an advisory board. Did you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, since I am a nonprofit organization, I was, first it was just kind of like an individual thing right now. And when I was registering, I said I would be the only person for, and I didn't have like a board, but I'm planning on, since I do want to grow Ignited Thinkers, as I'm going to college in 2 years, I really wanted to develop like an advisory board. And so some like a team where I could just continuously expand Ignited Thinkers. And I've met like amazing individuals like all of yourselves right here. And I would love to be able to like have a team who's interested in just like, helping me continuously grow Ignited Thinkers, to just reach out to more individuals. So I know when Mr. John asked me that question, I was like, I would love to, have any help I can, of course. So yeah, that was the point about the advisory board.
Yeah, that sounds good. And do you plan to continue with Ignited Thinkers after you go off to college and do your career?
Of course, 100%, no question. This is like a lifelong thing. I started it, I didn't know if it would work out or not, but I know that it does have impact. Even though I didn't reach out to a lot of students, maybe like, just a few 100,000, like maybe like hundreds to maybe 1,000 students. I didn't reach out to like millions or anything, but I would love to one day reach out to that many students. And so I hope once I go to college and I kind of have my like career on the side, I really want to focus on Ignited Thinkers and grow and give back to my community, and just always be a part of my life, because I've been a Girl Scout. Giving back and volunteering, I just spend most of my time doing that anyway. So I would absolutely love to, and I will continue Ignited Thinkers for the rest of my life.
That's quite a commitment.
Yeah, I don't think it's a commitment. It's fun to do it. And I always believe like, if you're going to give back, it's like fun doing it and you feel like you're helping society in some way. And when I do it, I learn things about myself too, and learn about different things in space. And it kind of gives me a responsibility to keep up with what's happening. Because when kids ask me certain questions, I'm like, I don't know about that, but I'm going to read about it tonight and I'm going to get back to you tomorrow when I email you. So I definitely keeps me on my toes, and I love talking with kids and inspiring them and just showing them that age is not a boundary, and definitely gender and ethnicity, your economic status, none of that is a boundary to anything. So just being able to convey that to even one student, I think is a win for me. So I'll definitely do that. It's not a commitment at all.
Well, do you have any plans to expand to Houston?
I would love to. If I go to Baylor College of Medicine, I know that I'll be living in Houston, and I'll definitely come to your in-person meetings and meet with you all.
We look forward to having them at some point again. It's been kind of challenging. Well, good deal. Anybody have other questions or things they would like to share?
It was great presentation, Gitika. Nice.
Thank you so much for all your kind words. I just saw all the messages in the chat, and I'll definitely be reaching out to all of you guys. I really appreciate all your support and help. Like every person that I meet, just like a new pathway, a new door opens. So I appreciate all your support.
Thanks.
So I was wondering, among the other interns you may have met, what sort of career paths were they looking for?
Yeah, so the Gene Lab program was like space biology and bioinformatics. So I found most of my peers wanted to do computer science, or they wanted to go into biology and medicine. Some of them wanted to go into bioinformatics or data analysis. Few actually said aerospace medicine, which was the program was space biology. So I was kind of shocked to see that I was the only one who was definitive that I wanted to be like an aerospace physician. But then I was able to convince a few of my friends that I worked with to consider that path. But most of them that actually came in were interested in bioinformatics. The program itself was on genomics analysis. So I guess that makes sense. And so it's just interesting. And actually there was this question. So we had an astronaut who came in and talked about going to space. And I remember he's like, who wants to go to Mars? And I remember being the only person who raised my hand saying I would like to go to Mars. And then when he said who wants to go to the moon, more people started raising their hands. But it was just surprising, like given an opportunity to go to Mars, I would jump at that. So it was funny to see that as well.
Well, I see we have Adam here. Hi, Adam. I was wondering if you tell us how things are going over there at a Blue Origin since we have you here.
Hey, yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of exciting things, a lot of non-public knowledge aspects to it. So I can't really speak too much on any future endeavors and plans and what's in the pipeline. But it should be a good decade for Blue Origin. And I mean, the first human launch was a party for all. We basically took the whole day off of work. Everyone just hung out in what we call the great room. So everyone was there, everyone was happy. We actually had like a little party karaoke type thing. So literally just sitting there in bliss and enjoying the moment.
Yeah, it was awesome. We've been looking for that for years, and to finally have it come, it's great. And then Wally Funk being a part of it, that was a wonderful touch.
Yeah, she made all the conversations a fun time, and it was good to hear her talk and just her excitement throughout the process.
Yeah, and we're definitely looking forward to all the great things that Blue Origin is going to be doing. So I know you can't share the non-public stuff, but the public stuff, it's really great to have somebody that's actually involved to kind of at least feel like we're, a couple of degrees away from it instead of being so far.
I actually am starting a transition right now. I'm in the process of accepting a role at Los Alamos National Lab, so I won't be at Blue Origin too much longer. But before I leave, I am getting that model rocket that I had messaged you about, so I'll donate that to the club, and y'all can have events where y'all go and launch it. Basically a new Shepherd rocket. It has a detachable top, so and it parachutes down all in one setup. And you just buy those reusable solid rocket boosters. So I'll be donating that. I should get that around November. And so when I get back into town in December, I'll meet up with you, Nathan, and let y'all be able to do stuff with it.
Well, that's awesome. And just looking through the chat, I see Dipti was asking if the recording is going to be shared. It will be posted on our website, northhoustonspace.org. and upload it to YouTube, and I'll send it out to our mailing list as well. So if you want to be notified when it gets updated, just sign up for a mailing list. And I'll put our website in the chat just so everybody has it. Let's see, John was asking if Jeff Bezos is going to be offering a free trip to 63 miles. I haven't heard anything about that, but Adam, did I miss something?
Not that I know of. There has been rumors that he would offer a free trip to an employee, but that's all it is rumors. So if there are free trips to be had, it'll most likely be by someone at Blue Origin that gets to participate well in advance before anyone from the public.
Yeah. Oh,
I think it's kind of interesting seeing this competition, between Virgin Galactic and Blue Origin, because to me it's clear that at least Blue Origin has a path forward. They've proven they can launch a rocket and land it again, but they've also proven that they can handle the control system for reusable boosters and that sort of thing. And with some modifications of the engines, end up using what they have as a second stage, for the future. It's not as clear to me what the future would be for Virgin Galactic. I mean, once you have a space plane, how much higher can you really go and get much out of it? And especially being so labor intensive, where it takes 2 pilots to get, another 4 people up there with you, as opposed to a fully automated system. I was wondering if other people had comments on this, because I don't really see much real future for Virgin Galactic.
I heard some talk about them looking at maybe instead of going straight up and straight down, actually flying between places, maybe going up above the atmosphere. They could actually get between places quicker, but I don't know, you're in that carrier aircraft for a long time. And
yeah, and it takes a lot of pilots, because you have to have pilots for the carrier aircraft and 2 pilots for the rocket plane itself, and and ground crew and so on. So it's fairly labor intensive to get a very small number of people, up to that level. Now, Blue Origin still has quite a ways to go too, to actually get something that could reach orbit, but at least it's clear they have a path and, and things in progress anyway. Again, I don't know where Virgin Galactic goes once they use up, all the people that can afford the really expensive tickets for a 3-minute weightlessness ride.
And yeah, New Shepard's really just been a experiment for Blue Origin. So they chose a lot of technology that's for the purpose of later pipeline items. So they're basically fine-tuning, learning at a cheap level where they're not putting too much money into it. And so they're gonna take everything they learned and put it into other programs. And so that's why their selection of a lot of things isn't really like purposely for space tourism, but it's for future projects and to give them that knowledge base.
But nowadays there are lots of discussions about space tourism, air pollution, and fuel usage and things like that. And they're saying that Blue Origin will use way more than Virgin Galactic in terms of, fuel use per person to go up and down.
Yeah, it seems true.
Yeah, go on, Andrew.
Hey, yeah, I was wondering if anybody watched the interview the interviews everybody astronaut Tim Dodd has done with Elon Musk over the last couple of days.
About the stacking and so on?
Yeah, they Elon took them through did a walkthrough, like a 2-hour walkthrough of the factory of the Gitika, or Starbase now, it's Starbase. And he just released the second of the 3 parts, and listening to Elon talk, obviously he was very tired and he said he had a bad back, but being able to listen to the way he conceptualized and is implementing his entire vision for SpaceX or Starship and Super Heavy is amazing. It's more than you could get out of anything else. I think this is Tim Dodd amazes me how he gets people to talk. He's so low key and gets everybody to relax around him and just talk. And he's so knowledgeable too, which is the amazing part about it.
I watched both of them this morning. When you released the second one, that's where my morning went. But I'll put it in the chat room, the links to them, because they are really amazing. Kind of looking behind the scenes at how it was built and what they're doing, and like you said, it's thought process. Assume all requirements are dumb, and every requirement, make sure you have a name by it that you could check with. And he brought in some examples of things at Tesla as well, where they had like this foam insulation between like the battery and the car, and the battery people, he was like, is that for fire suppression? And they're like, no, it's for noise dampening. But then the car people were like, it's for fire suppression. Come to find out, neither side really needed it, but they just presumed that the other side needed it. So kind of cool.
I'm betting that he upset a lot of engineers out there with the way he was talking about changing up the process and everything.
Yeah,
anyway,
I think they get used to it really quick.
Yeah, exactly. I've got to step off. I've got to go back to work. Y'all take care. Thank you very much.
Okay, take care. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, these are really two amazing walkthroughs of, if you want to see what goes on behind the scenes at Starbase, it's pretty amazing. I'll just put these in the chat room. Let's see, what else do we have? Oh, David shared the full demo of the VR settlement and what it took to create. So there's that link. I also put the link to our email list and a link to our website. And yeah. Well,
I wanted to add this, that the Deep Space Food Challenge submissions of the project has been over, and they are publishing the videos that teams have submitted on their social media, mainly on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and so on. And if you're interested about the future of food, maybe you can check those, and let's see how we're going to judge and who's going to be on top 10 by the end of September, I guess. Lots of insects, worm, and things like these in the proposals of the future protein for astronauts.
That's pretty neat. Well, I did have one request. As I think everybody on this call knows, I am currently engaged in a 5-year project called Countdown to the Moon, where I am interviewing a person a day till the end of 2024 to find out what people think about the future of humanity in the context of us going back to the moon. So I've done basically 600 interviews so far, and I have like 1,240 some odd more to go. And I was wondering if I might get a volunteer for after this call to interview one of y'all, if anybody was up to it, as I haven't interviewed. You can see this is how Gitika and I met. So thank you so much for volunteering for that.
Oh yeah, of course. It's an amazing initiative. I think it's a great documentation of history to see different, viewpoints on how people feel about going to the moon, and if people even know about it. So it's amazing. It's really interesting to watch the different videos too, and be like, oh wow, I didn't know that this person thinks like this. So it's a really cool initiative you're taking.
It's definitely, you talk about every time you go to one of those rocketry organizations that you help facilitate, you learn something new. The same thing's been true with pretty much every interview that I've had. It's kind of interesting to see the world from the perspective of somebody else.
Could we like take a picture, like if you guys are comfortable? For those who are not, like I can like crop them out, but like I would love to take a picture of all of us. I think that'd be fun.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
So everybody could try on their video, and then we can use the, I guess, the gallery view, and then we could get everybody. I hope
You
that's
take
a test. I hope that's a Tesla, Ian.
You're going to count down, Gitika, for
Yes.
3, 2, 1.
Yeah. Okay, I'll do that. Okay, ready? 3, 2, 1. Okay, took one. I'll just take one more in case someone blinked. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Okay, I got it.
Awesome.
I don't want to disturb his driving. I know he's like carrying his phone and like it's probably really difficult. Oh, it's not? Okay. Must be an experienced driver. I just got my driver's license, so I'm still trying to practice with 2 hands. I don't know when I'll be able to drive with 1 hand, but yeah, thank you guys so much for having me though.
Yeah, so Nathan, I posted a link too for a Foundation for Futures conversation event coming up this week. It's a 2-day event. I've got a panel I'm putting together on propellant depots and how that changes everything, a little of the history of it, but how that really can change a whole lot of paradigms in space. So got a great panel of some real experts in that will
It's very
be doing
similar
that.
to the Expanse main station. I don't remember what was the name of it, but have you seen that series?
I'm sorry, seen which one?
Expanse, a series. It was on Amazon, I guess.
Oh yeah, did see it. Did see the Expanse. It just happened that the scenario that was in the RFP for the VR chat thing that we did just so happened to sort of be out in the asteroid belt. It's part of a progression of scenarios that starts with going to the moon and ends up Mars and asteroids and
So the
Venus
architecture of the station that they're proposing, that is the main station, and the story starts from there. It is somehow very similar to the one that you were showing. Yeah, and at SIGSA we had a couple of projects that they were focusing on cultural diversity and how we can have, as you mentioned, for example, Chinatown in the orbit or things like this, and how can culture change when there's no gravity? How can, for example, you do window shopping when you're moving by different zones in that habitat zone, habitat area? Or I don't know, for example, one of the people at SIGSA, they were suggesting how, for example, those chandeliers, I don't know, balloons or the ornaments that Chinese they usually use into Chinatown, which is very iconic, how they can be transferred to something cultural, iconic cultural, that we can have it in space, that it can represent that kind of art. This was an RFP that the students had to design to, but it's all their design. This is totally a high school student design project. And the next scenario, we just finished the international competition last weekend, which was a Mars terraforming settlement. But the next one's, I think, in the sequence that is part of the future history that Anita Gale's, this is Anita Gale's competition. But the next in the scenarios, I think, either goes to Venus or it goes to Mercury. I think it goes to like Venus first, and then it goes to Mercury. And I think the first one maybe is Venus in a floating settlement in the atmosphere, and then it goes to Mercury, and then it goes in Mercury. Looks like it actually could be feasible with an idea that you might have heard of the settlement being on basically a road and staying in the terminator zone between light and dark. And then
in the scenario, there's a kind of an unobtainium sort of material that they find in Mercury that allows them to do a settlement on the surface of Venus. So then the scenario starts all over again after 5 years and starts with a moon base and progresses again. So, and it changes, it's different. The requirements are a little different every cycle. And it ends up with the international competition has students from all over the world, Australia, India, Asia, regional, UK, Eastern Europe, South America, 4 regionals in the US. And, typically about 250 students in each competition. The best of the winners of all the regions get together and form multinational companies to compete in the international, which we just finished in last week, and all in hybrid mode. So we had about 100 and some odd people in probably 150 or so in Florida at Kennedy Space Center at the visitor complex, and about 150 on virtual mode, which we did with Discord primarily, Zoom some, Google Docs and Google Drive sharing and such. So it's been pretty interesting. And then having the students working all night in all the different time zones and coordinating their work, it's pretty amazing what it takes to, you know, what they accomplish and everything. So this was just a side project. We realized it might be interesting and possible to import their models from their design proposals into VR chat, and then it could be a room where the students could actually go meet and walk around and see it and talk to each other in the VR world with, you know, with or without full VR headsets or just desktop streaming. And it kind of related back to when I first started on space station development, when we first got the contract with McDonnell Douglas. One of the first things our human engineering, human factors group at NASA basically had a VR representation of the space station where we could go evaluate different designs as though we were there. And you know, at that time, it took a $250,000 silicon graphics machine to render it. And I have no idea how much the headset would have been at that time. And now you can do this with commercial game technology stuff for a couple $1,000 bucks. It's amazing.
There are 2 other competitions that I'm involved with, which is still open. It's Plan the Moon and Plan Mars, which is basically designing greenhouse for both of them. And it has different levels of, I mean, it's for high school students and undergrad students. And it is cool because it has different aspects. It could be just design, it could be just ecosystem, it could be just plant system. So there are different criteria that different people can involve with. Yeah.
That's neat. Yeah, a lot of interesting things going on. So love to get involved with if you want. We're always looking for volunteers too to help put our competitions on.
Almost all the competitions, I mean, these 3, which involves NASA, it is done through a company that they're an international company, and I can send a link of them in the chat, that they hold more than 500 different competitions around the world that basically they're just competition. There are people in charge of the competitions. Yeah, they look for different people for advisory board, and they were asking me, for example, if I'm available for anything related to space and greenhouses. Then for further for future, I don't know, competitions, they just put those people in the advisory board, and then they have the competitions around the world. For Deep Space Food Challenge, there are 3 different competitions. It's for just the US, just Canada, and Canada plus Europe, and internationals, which yeah, it would be judged differently because for example, for the internationals, you cannot really transfer money that easily. There are some restrictions and things like this.
Right. Well, they say we we've tried to get at least one mentor in each of the companies. Usually, we've actually tried to get multiple mentors. We call them CEOs, but people from the industry to kind of help guide the students through their design development process. And we've also added a best presentation award. Jeff Notkins, the former president for National Space Society, gave a really great training program on presenting. And so in the last two international competitions, we've had both a regular technical competition, and then we've had also best presenting award for the best presenters. So anyway, it's pretty interesting stuff, and we're constantly trying to bring in new things that are happening, developments in the industry over the 5-year cycle. So revising some of the competition scenarios and such for the latest developments that we've got. Yeah, Anita's presented at Nathan's house when it was meetings were there on it.
I have a question that I'm interested in getting your perspectives on is I hear different opinions of people where they ask some people say that, oh, we can go colonizing Mars maybe in a few 20, 30 years. Whereas others are we're probably not even going to do it then. So what are your thoughts on it? Because personally, I used to really think that we could colonize in 20, 25 years, but now I'm kind of there's so much we don't know. There's so much we haven't discovered yet. So I just want to hear your thoughts. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it could be done. And a lot of us prefer the term now, settlement to colonizing. But yeah, I would think, better off starting closer to the Earth and maybe something in the lunar or low Earth orbit, maybe an L location, or on the moon probably to get the materials to do an L location one. I think it's possible. The one thing I haven't seen is maybe a really good economic justification for doing the one on Mars, because we're not sure there's anything that much different about Mars than for materials that we could get than other places, but and for the difficulty of getting there. But I think it is feasible, and so I don't know, others.
Yeah, I tend to think the big issue is economic. I mean, technically, you could probably get there. I'm not sure we know how to get there. I'm not sure we know how to live there yet. I mean, that there's some major issues associated with everything from ragged dust to poison in the soil and everything else. But you assume those are technical problems that are solvable. But the real question is, what are people going to do when they're there to support themselves? And that's true. That's even true for an O'Neill colony, out orbiting the Earth as well as Mars or the Moon. And so I think we do have to establish an economy, and we really need, the killer app in a sense is what you really need there. And, maybe it's going to be, if nothing else, you could do kind of a pyramid scheme where, okay, the purpose for going to the moon is to get rocket propellant so we can go to Mars, and, you kind of work your way out. But ultimately, at some point, there has to be something, produced a value that something, can be used. Now, maybe space solar power, that could be.
I was just going to say, that's a good justification for going to the moon anyway, to build solar power satellites.
Yeah. So either that, or we come up with a space elevator or something that makes it so cheap to get to space that the cost issues at least don't dominate it like they do now. But that's why, to me, I think an awful lot is going to be figuring out how to develop an economy, and a lot of that probably has to be automated in the early days. Just it's expensive to have people out there. The long range goal is to settle, to go everywhere, and have a place away from Earth. But how do you get to that point? And I think you need, you need to develop an economy, and then it'll take care of it. The problem will solve itself. I mean, once there's a reason to be there, finding a resource. The resources are out there. It's a question of what can we do with them.
Yeah. Well, the one thing that go ahead. Sorry, Craig.
Done.
Yeah, thought you were done. The one case that I think has been pretty well established. George Sowers with ULA, now Colorado School of Mines, and the Space Resources Program has put a very good case together to show that getting the water from the lunar polar regions or wherever can be used to allow refueling of vehicles so that you can reuse every vehicle to some extent. And with that, then it opens up a major change in the economics of it. It makes it a lot less expensive to go to the moon if you don't have to throw your airliner away every time you go there. We'd never travel to Australia if we had to throw away the 747 after we got there. So that's probably the biggest opportunity. But then also the solar power and other mining, and then the source for materials for other settlements like the free floating ones. I think we can make a reasonable case for that if it will just get to where the business cases can close in a time frame that the VCs will invest in, and it's going to probably take a partnership with multiple governments to be able to do it in an international way. That's my
I
thought.
definitely agree. I would even think that even to go to Mars, I would think it would have to be like multiple companies and organizations working together. I feel like it'd be really difficult for just NASA or just another space organization to do it by themselves. I feel like there has to be like some international, like, I don't know, maybe it's just my opinion. Maybe NASA could do it by themselves, but I just feel like it's a big fee. It doesn't seem possible. Yeah.
No, and even Elon, I mean, he talks about having transportation to Mars, but he doesn't really address all the other infrastructure that you need. So it is an opportunity for other companies to come in and put together those parts of the puzzle. But yeah, the economics is the hardest problem right now, I think, to solve.
Of course.
Yeah, I always say that the transportation, getting that cost way down is a necessary condition to getting into space, but it's not sufficient by itself. We need more. We need to figure out what to do. All we need is one thing. It could be, making of some new kind of semiconductor that can only be done in low gravity environments. In which case you really populate space stations and that sort of thing. If it's some kind of energy source on the moon, helium-3 or something, then okay, then that leads development on the moon. But we just need to keep looking really hard. And I think in a way we've squandered a lot of the time in the space station. We just haven't done enough, and I think that's picking up. Now that the end of the space station, is starting to appear. Now we're finally really stepping up the tempo, doing more experiments, and we're bound to stumble across something. I just hope we do it soon.
Oh well, there's already some very good experiments that are going on with the Z-band fibers with the very low losses, the human retina materials that can be grown there. There's a lot of things that are turning up in ISS. Now the problem with ISS is it's not a manufacturing facility. It doesn't have the throughput and capacity to do anything on a manufacturing scale. It can prove the research, which, by the way, just learning how to do research in microgravity is a huge challenge in itself. And there's not a lot of education opportunities to really learn how to do that. It's not a major university track anywhere, or very few. There may be a few isolated places where that's starting to pick up. It was happening earlier in the station program planning phase, but when the logistics of trying to get experiments there and the safety and everything of it started showing up, then some of the efforts to try to get those kind of educational tracks started kind of fizzed a little bit. Yeah, I mentioned I would suggest if you're at Ames, you check in with Lynn Harper there. She's been very much involved with some of this stuff.
I'll definitely reach out to her. Yeah, thank you for the contact. I didn't read about her before, so I'll definitely read and contact her.
Yeah, she's been part of a core group of us that have been trying to get commercial space happening and trying to get commercially enabled science and trying to get the cost down and trying to get business opportunities like propellant depots and this happening. So
I have a question, we do have like centrifuges or companies like Zero G that simulate microgravity. So what would be like the difference between like actual microgravity and this simulated microgravity that we have? Like, would the results like drastically change in the experiments or?
well, I think some of the big issues are what's the rotation speed. If you have the longer, the bigger diameter you've got, the slower the rotation, and Coriolis effects can be different. We had a centrifuge facility for space station that got canceled. The Japanese were going to provide it, the CAM, centrifuge accommodation module, but the microgravity scientists felt like it would wreck the pure microgravity environment too much to have a big centrifuge there spinning around. And originally we were supposed to have free flyers that would have isolated all that, but those got shot down early in the program too. So, had the pure microgravity type requirements been met in a free flyer, that could have allowed us to do some other things that we really weren't able to do.
Just wanted to add something that, as you were mentioning, for educational equipment for microgravity. It was last year around this time, I guess, that we were participating in World Design Organization, WDO, about designing an orbital university. That how the first orbital university would look like. What are the concepts of that, and what are the structural need, the hierarchical need, the whole system that we can, manage, how we can really have over there, and how it can start, and how we can end. We made a report of what we did in about a month that we were working on that. They told us that we're going to continue working about it soon, probably in the upcoming months. But yeah, this is the idea that we're following, but there are lots of issues, and we were collaborating internationally. And you were saying that I was waking up 3 a.m. because some people were on Hong Kong and it was almost their night. So, so we're talking about it like this to reach to the point that how would that look like? Yeah, there is a report about it, but not more than that.
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything published yet, but there is an initiative that the folks at NASA Ames, the space portal, Lynn Harper, Dan Rasky, others there have been working on, Allison Zuniga, called Lunar University, and it's just being kind of planned out, but they're trying to get a kind of a university project started with some I guess.
Yeah, the scenario that we were proposing was we can start it with a module that, for example, there are some arms that could be controlled from Earth, and you can do the projects that, for example, when I was at MIT, there is a payload every 3 months, about 2 pounds or 1 pound, something like that, dedicated to MIT student payload. So they can launch their projects in ISS and they can see how it works. But the problem with that is that they should write down all the instructions for the experiment, or it should be fully autonomous, that they just open the box and everything just goes interactively. So the one that we're proposing is that we can start with launching small payloads, like, I don't know if you know Ted Tagami, that they launch high school students biological or chemistry experiences in tubes. So it's just a small tube or something that they launch it. So we're proposing that we can have an arm over there just dedicated for this purposes, and I don't know, different universities, they can book an appointment with that arm or something like that, and then we can expand it to the full module. And for example, now it is just more biological, so you cannot really experiment something mechanically or for example, we cannot 3D print whatever you want over there. So we can expand like that. And then at the very far galaxy or something like that, then eventually we can have the actual university with lots of modules, even dorms and all the equipments and everything.
It sounds like they ought to get together with the Space Portal. Or you should go work with the Space Portal in Ames and see if there's some synergy there, because I know that part of the concept that the group I've been working with there has been trying to get is having students designing the experiments to go to the lunar surface as CLIPS payloads, and then having it, I think, where they could be remotely operating their own experiment. One of the problems with the way science is done with the ISS is you don't have the researcher themselves going to the space station in most cases. It's mostly a payload specialist astronaut will follow the instructions, but if there's anything goes wrong, they just kind of stop and go on to the next experiment. Whereas if you had the actual researcher being able to run things, then they can see what's happening with it. If they need to make adjustments, they can make those real time. You don't have to go through writing instructions for somebody else to go follow, and they can make observations themselves, which may be missed by somebody that isn't really the expert that's trying to do the research. So those are some of the limitations with how we do research currently.
Yeah, and I wanted to add another thing about the work collaborations of worldwide was that in the previous conference that I was at, it was ICES or something like this, that they were talking about African Union building different launch pads for SpaceX, and somehow importing whatever they need, the technology. I mean, buying the actual rocket and then launching their own payloads from their pads. And they were saying that now there are not many companies in the world that they're building airplanes, and every other country is just importing them. So why not we do that? And we would just buy those rockets and everything, and we launch whatever we want. So this is the thing that's going on. And there are, I don't know if you search, probably you can see the proposal sites that they have submitted to the conferences, or maybe other places that you can read about it. And Morocco, I guess, was one of the top 3 to get it. So yeah, I've heard about it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that you'll see is a difference in aviation versus space. In aviation, you've got a separation between the airlines and the charter operators and the manufacturers. You've got manufacturers of aircraft, and then you've got operators of aircraft. And that's ultimately probably part of where the space industry needs to go, is having it where others can basically purchase the vehicle and operate it themselves, which is probably a plus for the autonomous vehicle like Blue Origin has. It would be easier for an operator to operate something like that rather than having to have the pilots like Virgin Galactic would require.
Oh, past our time, Nathan.
Yes, I think we go ahead and end it here. And well, thank you all very much. And I guess we'll see you all at our next meeting, which is also going to be on Zoom on September 4th. And hopefully in October, we can have an in-person meeting, assuming we could find a place to do so. So if y'all know of any places that we could meet, let me know. But right now, the library is not a possibility.
Did you find a volunteer?
Did I find a volunteer? I maybe.
I think Masa volunteered. She'll stay after the call.
Oh, is that right? I don't know. I thought she said she was late to something.
I need to join my friend, so I can do it next week, but not now.
Okay, and I was chatting also with Pratama as well. So I didn't know if today would be good or if another day would be better for you.
Ian offered 6:30 to 7, but I don't know if that works for you or not.
I'm actually already interviewed Ian, so that's sort of.
Okay, have you interviewed me yet? I think you have.
I've interviewed you too, and I swear I interviewed Masa, but I can't find it. So.
Well, I'll do one, but I don't think I can do it this evening.
Okay, yeah, no, that's
Sorry.
lots of days between now and the end of 2024. So.
If
Well,
you want
as
some
I
other,
recall on the website, you have a place where you can sign up, right?
Yes, yes, I can put that in the chat room. All the times are listed at 7 Central, just because I was trying to keep it from conflicting with work. But if there's a day that will work for people, but that time's no good, just let me know.
Okay.
Well, cool. Well, I'll go ahead and stop the recording, and I guess I'll see y'all next time.
okay,
That's Nathan. Great call.
Yeah.
I,
Thanks.
Thank you, Gitika. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Have a
yeah,
great
Thank
enjoy,
evening.
you.
Bye. Thank you. And
enjoyed your
great talk.
presentation. Good work, Gitika.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you
You're
all.
welcome. Bye.
Bye.